Hello, everyone, and welcome to this premiere episode of Gods, Folk, and Destiny. In the next few minutes, I want to talk about those three words because they're really important to me. Let's start with the idea of gods. Now, which gods? Whose gods? What are gods? Are gods real? Are gods Jungian archetypes? And maybe most important, what does it matter? Why is this important to us? Folk. We think we know what we mean by folk. Are there other ways of looking at folk? Are there different kinds of folk? Does everyone have a folk? And again, why does it matter? Destiny. That's the big one, isn't it? We don't talk much about destiny anymore. Maybe it's time we did some of that, because destiny is very important indeed. So, all right, let's take that from the top. Gods. Telling you right now, my gods are the Nordic gods. They're the gods that are familiar to us from the Viking Age. They are the ones that speak to us in so many different media these days. It's hard to believe that this summer will be 50 years since I pledged my allegiance to Odin. And I've had no regrets, no sorrows. Well, there's always sorrows, but you overcome those because Odin is all about overcoming. Odin, Thor, Freya, Frigga, Heimdall, Nanna, Balder. These are the deities of the North. Most of the people listening to this are familiar with this. You know who they are. You have an idea of the Aesir, which are more assertive, more sky-oriented, more force and wisdom-oriented, Odin, Thor, so forth. Then you have the Vanir with Frey and Freya, associated with productivity, with love, with well-being, with the good things of life and rebirth, and the continuance of life. So we have an idea who these deities are, and most of the people who are listening to this in one way or another follow those deities. Or maybe you're just curious and you're just dropping in. So let's elaborate a little bit. We think of the Northmen, we think of the Vikings, we think of Odin and long ships and all of that. And most of us tend to operate that way with the Germanic deities because, well, we know a lot about them. You know, we have lots of sources to work with. We have a fairly coherent history. We've got a little more of an idea of what's going on there. They're more approachable in some ways, easier to work with. But our religion, in its broader aspects, is not limited to Scandinavia. And we occupied most of Central Europe. You know, the Germanic tribes, all the way from the Baltic, all the way down to the Rhine, beyond, down other areas, into northern Italy, and other places far beyond. So our people, we'll come to that word folk in a minute, our people, the followers of our faith that we hold dear to us, took different forms and in different places. I mean, in Germany, it was differently practiced than it was in Scandinavia, and so forth. You know, the Anglo-Saxons, or I should just say the Saxons, to be more accurate. You know, a lot of us can trace our ancestry back to England and thus to the Saxons. And it was a little bit different there. But the underlying themes were all the same. Odin in the north is essentially Wotan in Germany, or Woden of the Saxons. Those three names from him all trace back to a reconstructed Proto-Germanic word, Wovanaz. And the idea there is one of wisdom, of consciousness, of ever expanding wisdom and will. And that is a constant, whether you're dealing with the continental expressions of our faith, or you know, the northern up in Norway, Denmark, Sweden, or what. And of course, today, our religion is practiced all around the world, wherever we are, country after country after country. Certainly, the dispersal of our military around the world has had a little bit to do with that as well. You know, we know men who literally go into battle calling upon the gods. I recently met a young lad from the French Foreign Legion. I was down at the gym and working out, and there was another fellow over there working with an older man, obviously his father. And I walk past and I glance over and I look at his neck, and he's got a big set of Foreign Legion para-wings tattooed on his neck. Well, obviously we had to talk. And what he tells me is that in the Legion, you know, the old religion is alive and well. All the legionnaires that trace back from Normandy, they all wear hammers. He instantly knew what a hammer was. Yes, they drink mead out of horns. They do this before battle. They do this as a spiritual exercise. So our way, whether you call it Alsatru or the Troth or heathenry, whatever name you have for this thing of ours, it's all over the place, alive, well, being practiced by people who care about it. But just why? Why do the gods matter so? Well, that brings us to the subject of the folk. When I think of the folk, several different ideas come to mind. Part of it is based on heredity, on blood, on genetics. Our folk, broadly speaking, is everyone in the world of Germanic descent. You could even expand it out there from that and tie it in with almost everybody in Europe, because if you look at the old Celtic beliefs, if you look at the Slavic beliefs, and you look at the Germanic beliefs, you could draw parallel after parallel after parallel. Hilda Ellis Davidson wrote a really good book on that. I'll give you a review of that sometime soon. But she compared particularly the Celtic religion with the northern thing, this thing that we do. And the parallels were amazing and wonderful to behold. So to that extent, the folk is really huge. It's all of the people essentially of Northern Europe, and everyone descended from them. But that's not that simple, you know, because some of us practice the old faith, and some of us are Christians, and some of us are atheists, and some of us are agnostics or whatever. Are they members of the folk too? I say yes, but it's a different way of defining folk. Think of concentric circles. Down here in the center, you've got your family line, your immediate acquaintances, the people you bloat with. All of these people are very close indeed. But then you've got all those other people who share our history, who share our blood, and who share our faith, even if we haven't met them. All those legionnaires. And then beyond that, you've got people who have our blood, have that essence that is within us, but they follow something else. So I think of loyalty as being largely a matter of concentric circles. And you have to kind of shift back and forth depending on who you're talking about. But again, why is folk important? Well, before we move on to destiny, which is the big one, I want to go back just a bit and talk about why the gods are important to the folk. The reason for that is that they are our gods. We are linked with them innately, inextricably. They are a part of our very being. In shamanic societies, when a person is ill or sick, disturbed, not functioning right, they take the person to a shaman and they say, we've got a man with a problem here. You've got to help us. And then the shaman goes on a journey into the other world to seek the person's soul, because the traditional way of explaining this illness is that the man's soul is gone. It's wandering away out there. It's gotten away from him. And so the shaman goes, does soul retrieval, and then brings back and unifies that person with their soul. Something like that has happened to us as people of European descent. We too have lost our soul, not so much our individual souls as our collective soul, that greater soul of which we are a part. It's gone wandering. We've been cut off from it, cut off by materialism, cut off by alien religions, cut off by a world that is not conducive to experiencing soul and maintaining soul. We all have to become shamans in a way. We have to go forth and recover that soul. We'll have help from other people, but essentially it's something we have to do ourselves. And we do that with the gods and the goddesses. The holy powers, the gods, the goddesses, are expressions of this thing of ours that is a distillation of all of our spiritual existence from the very beginning. When we talk about also true or for true or heathenry, what we're talking about is something that is the condensed version, the summary of all of the spiritual experience of our people back to the very beginning. We have to be able to tap into that in order to be whole as individuals and as a group. You might say, no, we're doing okay. What's the problem? But if you look carefully around us, and I'm not trying to get into politics too much here, but the fact is, politics affects real life. So don't call it politics, call it society, call it just the well-being of our people. Do we have a state of well-being? Obviously, not everything's awry, some things are fine, but other things are just totally jacked. Our self-esteem, our sense of ourselves as a people, our willingness to acknowledge the great things that we have done. The easy way that we let sometimes other people's ride over us and not give us respect and not give us what is due to us. That is a spiritual issue. Our self-esteem is a spiritual issue. Our existence as a people is a spiritual issue. And as I have said before in many different times and contexts, the existence of my people is not negotiable. Sometimes the solutions are political, but politics must be informed by spirituality. It must be informed by a deeper understanding that comes from the spiritual nature of things. That's why the gods and all that the gods represent, all this ancient way of ours, is so important, so crucial to the folk. Without it, we are wandering. We are lost. It's no secret that in every country where our people reside, our population is dropping. The only reason for that is because we have given up on ourselves. We don't care about ourselves anymore. Why should we care? Because of the ancestors. Behind each and every one of us is a long line of men and women who, despite war and famine and hunger and disease, survived at least long enough to reproduce. You and I are the latest in a very, very long line of winners, of people who survived. We have to call upon that might and take the gifts that our ancestors have given us. And one of the gifts that the ancestors have given us is that gift of life itself. They passed that torch on, and we have a duty to not let it go out. We have a duty to keep that fire burning. That way, the connection, the harmony between the folk and the gods is maintained. Without the folk, how would the gods even express in Midgard? That could be the beginning of a long philosophical discussion, but that's for another day. So we've got the gods, we've got all that they represent, all the spiritual customs and structure and subtext and elaboration that they suggest to us. We've got the folk, with whom we have certain duties and get certain gifts back in return. So what about that destiny thing? Gods, folk, and destiny. We don't talk much about that, but we need to. We need to have the big picture of where we're going, who we are. We've got all those ancestors behind us, countless generations of our people. We've got the gods within us, interacting with us continually. And you could say, oh, but those gods, that's not a real thing. I mean, they're symbols, right? Right? They're just symbols. No. It's easy to dismiss them that way. And if you dismiss them, then you can dismiss the idea of destiny. And you can take another viewpoint and say, well, okay, maybe the gods and the goddesses aren't just little made up things, maybe they're more than just fairy tales. Maybe they're Jungian archetypes in the collective unconscious of the Germanic folk. Well, I think that Jung's theories are interesting, and with them, I think we can learn things about the gods, particularly Wotan. As you know, Carl Jung wrote a rather lengthy essay on Wotan and got so many of his characteristics absolutely spot on. But just a consciousless archetype? And I don't think so. I think those archetypes are useful concepts and we can learn from them. But essentially, Jungian archetypes are two-dimensional. They're flat. They're like cardboard cutouts of a divine truth, of a multi-dimensional, shall we say, entity, a consciousness that interacts with us. And why do I say that? 50 years of experience. 50 years. Some of you have heard my tales on those things, and I'm not going to repeat them today. I'm definitely in the danger of turning into one of those old geezers that repeats the same stories over and over, and I don't really want to be that way, so I'm going to hold some things back. We'll bear with that. I'll just say that the experiences of my life, the incredible synchronicities that have occurred, the times that my ass has been hauled out of the fire when there was absolutely no way that should be happening, convinced me that my relationship with Odin is not just me talking to a ghost, not just me talking to a Jungian archetype. Odin, under whatever name, Wotan, Woden, whoever, is alive, well, and functioning. And I'm pretty sure the other gods and goddesses are too. So this whole thing isn't just a head trip or a mind trip. If we're going to be talking about real gods and goddesses and about real ways, real traditions that matter, really matter, if we're going to be talking about destiny, that's why it's important that we take it seriously. When we talk about destiny, we think about the future. What is going to happen to us down the line? What are we going to create? With what the gods and our ancestors have given us, what will we forge? Now we're talking destiny, and we need to do that. I believe that our destiny, our people, our folk, and I'm thinking both the folk within, that is to say, those of us who practice the faith, and the folk without, who don't have a clue about that yet, but they still share our blood, our brain, our souls, our minds. We are the explorers. We are the dawn seekers. We are the ones who sat around the campfires and looked up at the stars and wondered what they were. And ever since we knew what they were, we have wanted to go beyond. We are destined for sovereignty, for control over our fate, not anyone else's fate. I don't want to control anybody else's fate. Other folk outside our own, the folk with different gods from ours, the folk from other parts of the world, they have their own destinies. I do not know what their destinies are, and it's not mine to say. But I sense deep in my heart that our destiny is to be masters of our fate, in charge of those things that will happen to us, and that we are to expand that into the infinite. We are the Faustian folk. We are the ones that took and take great risk just to go a little farther. As we do this, we are echoing and imitating Odin himself. Odin, the venturer. Odin, the risker. Odin, always seeking knowledge, always seeking wisdom, restless, moving, out and about in disguise, roaming through the world. We are the starfarers. We are the ones who initiated the whole concept of leaving the earth, blessed earth, not to say goodbye, but maybe to say, hey, later. The first human object to go into space, to cross the von Karman line, 1944, V2. That's not a political statement. I'm just reporting, okay? Yeah. General Dornberger turns to young Werner von Braun, who later, of course, built the U.S. space program, and said, "Von Braun, do you realize what has happened here today? The spaceship has been born." 1944. We are the expansive folk. We crave frontiers. We crave challenges. Only by meeting these cravings and meeting these challenges, only then can we be worthy of the seekers. Odin archetypally, but all our great leaders and explorers who have followed us since. Now, I have no holy writ that tells me that what I'm telling you now is some sort of universal truth. Maybe I'm just full of it. But on the other hand, I've got 50 years that has led me this direction. We must understand the wonderful things that await us, but we must maintain our sovereignty as a people, and we must not be trapped in the many technological and social and political traps along the way. But that's a story for another day. So here I sit with the first episode of Gods, Folk, and Destiny, presenting it to you, not really following my notes. And I hope that you have gleaned something of value from this. If you have, obviously, please like and subscribe and further our work as best you can. So, with that said, with that explanation kind of taken care of, I go to turn to Dazzling Dave Martell, the Bog Man, who I'm sure will have a few things to say about all of this. And I just want to kick some of these ideas around a little bit. Dave, you there?
I'm here. What's going on, everybody? Oh, man, Mr. McNallen, that was... You got me all fired up talking about galactic pagan supremacy, leaving the Earth behind and sailing the cosmos with spaceships with dragons on the front, Hyperborean megaships. I can't wait.
yeah. Interstellar Lebensraum, man.
Yeah.
But the thing is, seriously, if we've got a vertical frontier, we don't have to go picking on other people's. We don't need colonies, in Africa or Asia or crap like that. We need to leave those people alone. Let them live out their destinies, man. We're going vertical.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's the only way we can go. And you touched on something there that I touch on a lot, and I think it's really, really important. It's the whole reason I've kind of switched gears with kind of like my content and stuff like that, and getting basically just all in with spirituality. I came to this realization before, but I kind of, we all got caught up in politics once again over this last election cycle and everything like that. But now I'm coming back home, and I've come to the realization that, as you mentioned, our folk are sick. They have a soul sickness, a soul rot, if you will.
Yep.
And if we want good solutions to happen, if we want good politics to happen, we have to go back to square one, and we have to figure out who we are, and we have to heal ourselves spiritually. I mentioned this, I used this analogy before the show started. If you're a guy and you're going out to do a fight, do an MMA fight or a boxing match or whatever, are you just gonna go out as is? No, you're gonna train vigorously. You're gonna put your heart into it, and you're gonna make sure you are the best possible shape you can be before you go out and you throw the first punch. You're gonna study your enemy. You're gonna study yourself. You're gonna self-reflect. You're gonna go through this entire rigorous process of training. And right now we're out. We're not even swinging. We're out. Kind of fat and out of shape, getting punched in the face, and we're not doing anything about it. But we need to go back to the gym, to the drawing board, and figure out who we are on the inside and begin to walk the primordial path.
I think we got off track a while, and I'm as guilty of that as anybody. The political thing was big, started during the presidential election and continued afterwards. The rise of the new right, the meme wars, all that stuff. And for a while, edginess was the most prized virtue. And, the edginess was amusing and it was clever, but there's something narcissistic about it. It's not about being an edgelord. It's about reaching people. And you don't reach people if you're being an edgelord. You're pissing people off. I'm not saying that there's not anything wrong with pissing people off. Don't get me wrong. But, just basic psychology. If you're going to convince somebody, if you want to influence them, cut out the shit talking. It's not the point.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%, and it's there's a time and a place for it. Obviously, when I'm with my buddies and the doors are closed and we're drinking beers, we say some of the most rotten, awful, disgusting stuff that you can imagine that I would never say out in the open. But it's it's locker room talk, and there's time. There's comedy. Like, comedy, in my opinion, has no bounds. You should be able to say whatever you want, and as long as it's funny, then it's entertaining people. It's making them laugh and stuff like that. And a lot of times, satire does some really good social critique and stuff like that. But as a whole, I think a lot of us got really carried away with the edgy stuff and got really carried away. And our ancestors, and looking all the way back, don't even go all the way back. Look at Mr. McNallen, your generation and the generation before you, and my grandfather's generation. My grandfather, before he would go to the store, he would dress up and wear a suit to the store. These were guys that were so well spoken and articulate. They were gentlemen, and it's I get the edge. I get the edgies. I'm an edge lord myself. I'm the bog lord. Of course. But there's a time and a place, and we are really lacking with that kind of gentlemanly discourse, that very proper way. You wouldn't in ritual. You never say this kind of stuff. You would never address the gods in this kind of way. So if you're really trying to say something meaningful, and you're really trying to better the folk and reach them in the folk soul, and set out a transmission to the folk soul and really reach people and help our people heal. The way that you don't do that by being completely over the edge, obnoxiously vulgar and stuff. It's just not how it works. People have a visceral reaction to that.
Well, I agree, and especially in ritual, and that kind of comes back to some things I kind of intended to say about the nature of the gods. What is their relationship to us? And I see them as elder kin, is a term that's often used. I think that's a good term. They are the life givers in many ways. They are, in a sense, they are, quote, friends. But it's not like a slap on the back, hey, buddy, how you doing thing. Hey, Thor, what's going on, bro? Pass a horn. No, it's not like that. And certainly that guy, no, that's not it. I think that in ritual, as I observe and as I practice ritual, I treat the gods and the goddesses as though they were, quote, friends, only because in Germanic society, what you do with friends is give them gifts, right? I mean, the sagas are full of that. Halfamail's got a lot of that sort of, give a gift, buy your buddy good things and go to see him often, stuff like that, and that's true. And to that extent, I personally imitate that in my bloats. It's all about gift giving. It's all about that Gable room. It's all about, I love the gods, and so what I give them is not a horn of mead. Gods don't need mead. I mean, really? What they need is our devotion, our loyalty, our dedication, from heart to hand to horn is what I give. That's our gift to them. And then I ask for other things. Usually wisdom, which is always a good thing to have, or good luck in a tight spot. I really would like my parachute to open, things like this. So in a way, I treat them as friends, and in Sumble, we raise horns to them, but it's not like a overly familiar thing. We need to always understand, they like us, and they'll help us, and they're cool, and they're not like some other deities that just screw you over for the fun of it. But there's always a respect there.
Yeah.
Always, don't get edgy with Odin. I mean, bam.
Nah, not at all. And I've always kind of taken the approach of showing them my best face. When I'm gothy of my kindred. I perform ritual and bloat and stuff like that. When I do that, I wear my best clothes. I speak as articulately and polite as possible. I'm a professional when I do it. I'm a professional. I pour my heart into it, and never once will you hear me get when I go on my podcast, I hoot and holler and I say dirty jokes and make fun of people and like do all that stuff. Never once will you hear me do that in a spiritual setting, because yes, they are our friends, right. But as Mr. McNallen described, the friend dynamic is about gift giving and giving and receiving back, just mutual transaction, like that kind of stuff. It's not like, as he said, what's up, bro? What's up, dog? It's not like that at all. And in fact, you have to keep in mind, and this is a narrative that goes on with certain heathens, is that this whole I don't kneel before the gods and they're not my superiors. Yeah, dude, they're the gods. Of course, they're your superiors. There's plenty of
and
go ahead.
One way of maybe looking at it is not so much Odin particularly, but I guess you could apply this to any of the gods or goddesses, to see them not as so much as friends, but as Odin is my Drighton. He's the Lord of the Hall. I am his retainer. I serve and work with him, and in turn he gives various gifts. I got an arm ring under very peculiar circumstances I won't go into now, but I took it as a gift from him. And in the old days, from England to Scandinavia to the continent, everywhere, the whole idea was that the Lord of the Hall, the Jarl, the king, the whatever his particular office was, or however you wanted to think of him, he would give his retainers, his fighting men, arm rings. And in turn, they gave him loyalty. That was an exchange. Gabo again, mutual exchange. So maybe rather than just saying they're our friends, we could add in, but he outranks us.
Yeah, absolutely. They're like friends in high places or something like that. But
exactly.
I think that there's this really false narrative that kind of comes from the left-hand path side of things about self-deification or something like that. And if you read any of the stories, if you look at any sort of artifacts or anything, anytime there's a depiction or a description of somebody worshiping or somebody in communication with the gods, they're kneeling. You kneel before your king. You would kneel before your queen. You would kneel before your lord. You would kneel before you see in Japan. I was just watching a video. It was one of the high priests of Shinto presenting something to one of the emperor's family members or something like that. And he got on his knees and he bowed down. And it's just that that respect of your superior. A lot of people in our community will hoot and holler about hierarchy, but when it comes time to actually assume their place in the hierarchy, then it becomes an issue. So I think and I'm not trying to blast everybody that whatever, but this is something that's important. We have to come to terms with our place in the universe and come to terms with our place in the hierarchy as mortals, as living beings, that we are indeed underneath the gods. They are our superiors, and we need to respect them as such.
I agree with that, basically. I think of it, well, no great surprise that I would think of it in a military way. And I do. You've got superior officers. You don't walk up to the colonel if you're a private and say, hey, bro, got a cigarette? That stuff isn't on. You treat them with respect. You salute a superior officer. You behave in a particular manner. And these hierarchies existed in the old days, especially, in a warrior kind of situation. Yeah, you're going to have leaders. It's not every man for himself. I mean, the people in charge, and then there's been the foot doggies that charge on, carry the mission. I mean, that's the nature of warfare. It's also the nature of human interactions in a more general sense. Now, at the same time, our native cultures in Northern Europe could be very democratic, but even then there were limitations on this. The freemen, the weapons bearers had a vote in the assembly, and but then you had the guys that basically were like the Supreme Court over on the one side, the leading guys that had the ear of the Jarl, the prince, the king, the whatever he was. So there was democracy in that sense in a political way, but there was never this idea that, we are all equal. No, free men are not equal, and equal men are not free.
Yeah.
So, there's a hierarchy, but I like to think that one can climb that hierarchy.
Sure.
Now, Odin is all about wisdom. He will teach those who want to learn wisdom. We can, I think, evolve beyond for now, but that's a whole other story.
And historically speaking, you're absolutely right about climbing the hierarchy, because even going back to the Bronze Age, we know that the Germanic peoples always had a caste system. The one that we know the most about, obviously, is the one from the Iron Age, where you have the Jarl caste, the Carl, you have what's called the Bondi, who were they were people that were essentially like tenants or something like that lived on the
Right.
land, and then you had a thrall caste, they weren't quite slaves, but they were indentured. I don't know if indentured servant is the right term, but they were people that belonged to their lord. But if you were a good thrall, if you were a noble man, you had great achievements and stuff like that, you could ascend to higher levels of the caste. It's not like it's hierarchy is something that's completely interwoven in with our belief system. And I'm not going to turn around and say that we should try to reinvent the caste system today, because I don't know how people are going to react to that. I don't know how well that's going to go over. Like, hey Tom, you're a thrall now. What? That's not going to.
Screw you.
Yeah.
You're the thrall.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that's not going to go over well. But the
Draw straws, man.
Yeah. I would be real mad if we did like a coin flip about it. Like, but
Yeah, that would suck.
that would be terrible, because I have terrible luck. I would lose. I would be a thrall, and I would be a terrible thrall. Even if I try, I'm terrible. Ask my wife. I can't even like follow directions at all. But but what I'm getting at here is hierarchy is 100% woven into our belief system, into our worldview. And we gotta do our best to oblige that, to look at what is the objective truth, what is the spiritual universal truth that comes from the Eddas, that comes from our sources, because those are divine texts. That is our hierology. That's where our truths come from. Right. And if you believe that is divine text, then if this is your faith, if this is your path, you are obligated to do your best to digest that and embrace it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Obviously, we're not going to recreate, the 8th century here, but we need to understand the basic principles and apply the basic principles to our situation. And no, we're not all equal. Some people are better at X and Y and Z, and others at A, B, and C. Whatever it may be. But we can all get better. We can all work our way up. We can all be that thrall who just does something so astounding that they bring him in. I mean, that we find that in the sagas.
Yeah. So
we can apply that to our lives as well.
Absolutely.
I definitely want to rank my way up in terms of wisdom. I've been a follower of Odin, as I said, for 50 years now. And he's all about wisdom and acquiring wisdom. And I think that he doesn't want us to kiss his hand, foot, anything. he wants us to become more like him. I think he's there staring at us with that one eye saying, so, all right, you got it now? Come on, let's go.
Absolutely.
Be more, become more. That's a part of that whole Faustian thing that links in with space exploration too. It's the same idea. Be more, do more, become more, with a big capital B, become.
Yeah. I agree with that 100%. It's and when I talk about this stuff like hierarchy, people a lot of times I get this reaction that, well, you're talking about being submissive, like being a lamb in an Abrahamic religion, or that's not at all what I'm getting at here. There's nuance to every topic and scenario. There's nuance to everything. And what it is not so much that you should just like bow down and be submissive and be one of Odin's lambs or whatever, but what it does mean is that you should have respect for the order of things, the order and the hierarchy. Those principles must be understood before you can venture forth and before you can attempt to climb the ladder and climb the peaks and do all this good stuff and achieve in life. And once you center, we're talking about going back and centering ourselves and finding who we are. When you figure out, it's like, yeah, I'm here, and I'm okay with that. But now I'm going to move forward.
Yeah,
that's pretty much what I'm getting at.
Every Wednesday, Woden's Day, I take that ring, that arm ring I mentioned earlier, and on it I swear to Odin. I say something like, I mean, it's extemporaneous, but basically it falls into the pattern of, Odin, you are my Drighton, my war leader, my wisdom giver, my God. You gave me this ring, and in turn, I give you loyalty and bravery unto death or beyond. It's a gift, price for a price, gift for a gift. And I don't see that as being submissive at all. I think it's a great honor to be able to do that because it implies further evolution. It implies that I'm not just going to be, resting on past merit and not trying to achieve more. Of course, I'm going to push myself. I'm going to fight the harder. I'm going to study the harder. I'm going to push myself more in every way, just to be worthy of that. In a way, I think when we make a deal with a deity, I think we're talking destiny. It might be destiny with a small d rather than a big D. But yeah, we're talking about an opportunity to become more. And someone who thinks that they don't have any room to improve, well, they kind of have a problem right there,
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And one thing you mentioned about, you said, you talk about gods. You have it's gods, folk, and destiny. And you mentioned about gods, and you mentioned about a deity and stuff like that. And you mentioned a few times about, and I really liked it. You mentioned about Carl Jung's archetypes and stuff like that, which I think are absolutely fascinating as well. And I think there's something that's required reading for all people that want to venture into the pagan worldview, if you will. But I think that there's a lot of unnecessary debate over the nature of the gods and what are the gods. And you asked this in the beginning of the podcast with your monologue, what and who are the gods? And I think that we should look at how our ancestors viewed the gods, and that they viewed them as real deities, and they are indeed real deities. And the more that you practice, and the more that you bloat, and the more that you bring ritual into your life and your lifestyle and your daily routine, the more you will gain a connection to them, and you will find out they will reveal themselves to you in their own ways. And it's just case closed. Yes, they can be symbols, and in the lore we find symbolism everywhere. We find parallels. Yes, they can be archetypes. Yes, they can be this and this and that, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, at its core, first and foremost priority, they are gods. They are deities, and they are real.
Right. I mean, George Washington is a symbol too, right? Yeah. But he also was a real person. So yeah, absolutely. That's been my experience.
Yeah.
Speaking
of the living symbols, you did a video a while back I think it was one of your really great Wolf Age videos on Red Ice, and you were talking about Tommy Robinson. Is that his name, Robinson, the British guy? And you said you pointed out you did it, very strategically. You mentioned about the criticisms of Tommy Robinson, and I have those same criticisms, and a lot of us have those same criticisms of him. But what you pointed out, which I felt was very important and very succinct, was that you should not support, at least during that situation, you shouldn't have supported Tommy Robinson himself, but you support the symbol of Tommy Robinson and the kind of like the font of energy around the meme of Tommy Robinson.
Yeah, pretty much. You end up supporting Tommy Robinson in a practical sense anyway, but with the knowledge that he is flawed, like we all are to some extent. But he's got some what I feel are really serious flaws, and I think a lot of people on our end of things would agree with that. But the whole issue was bigger than him. It was bigger than Tommy Robinson. Tommy Robinson, the man, is nothing compared to the energy that he rose. You had, tens of thousands of ordinary Englishmen and women and young people out there, and all different places on the spectrum. Some of them very, kosher conservative. Some of them, it's just political. Some of them spiritual. You could look out across that sea of people, and within minutes, I saw a Keck flag, a MAGA hat in England, and I did it in Chevron. And that's the ones that just come to mind, off the top of my head. And all those people, if you get people motivated and out there like that, they don't just stand there and, hold their side. They talk to each other. It's a breeding ground of ideas, thoughts. People who were pink-pilled get red-pilled, and people who were not particular anything just get nudged along. And if you shut your mind to all of that, if you say, "Oh no, the hell with Tommy Robinson, because he does this, that, and the other, and hangs out with X and Y and Z and whatever," you're losing an opportunity. Got to be practical about this stuff. That's the only way we're going to get what we need out of this. The existence of our people is to be realists and not get so wrapped up in the ideology that we don't make a good decision.
Yeah. Absolutely. You're talking about we're talking about some of this political, meta-political actually stuff. The Trump election. A lot of guys. Yeah, a lot of us. I want to stay away from politics here, but I do want to mention about the Trump election and stuff like that. We're all very disappointed with some of the stuff that has happened, and we didn't get what we wanted, and a lot of us are not crazy about it, and rightly so. I'm not going to mention anything about that, but what I do want to mention is don't for 1 second feel guilty about being a part of that. That was a broadcast from the folk soul. That was a font of spiritual energy of all of the people collectively being unhappy and knowing subconsciously about the threat and the struggle that is going on with our people. So don't feel guilty at all. Don't feel like you were tricked. You weren't tricked. You were brought up in the font, the current of energy that was coming from the folk soul, the aggression, the strength, the frustration, all of it combined, as well as the hope. There was hope. It was just like all of these positive momentum, this momentous kind of feelings and energies just came up in this giant font that is Trump. So if you can dislike and hate Trump the man, you could say he's a disappointment, you could say all of this stuff, but the bottom line is Trump the meme, Trump the spirit of the movement was one of the most powerful and important things to happen in our lifetimes.
In its own way, it's a lot like the Tommy Robinson situation. Whatever his flaws, and goodness knows, I think most of us would agree he's got them. We have to work with what we've got and turn it into something better. And, politicians have to be held to account too. They have to be held to actually fulfill their promises. But as you say, there's no point in getting too deeply into politics. I think we all know where we're at on that. And It's not that politics doesn't matter. I'm very political. Most of the things I do for Red Ice will be political, one way or another. Although I always want to kind of keep the spiritual thing there, because I don't want the Red Ice audience to not understand what I believe and where my heart and my soul is. But politics is important. I hope that all our listeners are political in the sense that they get out and vote and get out and support, well, their candidate, who usually will be our candidate. But politics is largely downstream from the thing that we do. The metapolitical, the spiritual, which I think can be another form of metapolitical, is upstream from politics. It influences politics. It determines the nature and the course of politics. The Votan Network stuff that I've done is seriously religious. We climb mountains and we give blood to Votan, and that's absolutely not just a show. It's absolutely sincere, but it is also cultural, and it is metapolitical in that it stimulates people to actual action as opposed to some other kind, I guess, and makes a synergistic whole, so that it promotes political ends. It changes things in the world politically, but by spiritual and metapolitical means.
Yeah, 100%. And I think one of the strongest themes of what we were talking about tonight is the idea that politics should not be your identity. Spirituality, your folk, your gods, and all of these wonderful things are your identity. Politics is an expression of your identity.
Yeah,
it is a tool.
Yeah, if you've got the spiritual end of it right, you will make the right political decisions. You don't need anybody telling you what that will be. I mean,
Yeah.
you'll be in the ballpark, if not absolutely beam on. It's all good.
Yeah, I could tell.
So
right
there
away.
it is. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, when now that I've kind of taken a step back and I've gotten back into studying the Eddas and studying these things and researching and having so many wonderful teachers and getting back into faith and focusing and sharpening my axe, or whatever you want to say. I could tell when I have a discussion with somebody and it's a political discussion, I could tell within the first 30 seconds if their view of politics comes from a spiritual worldview, because it's much more nuanced, it's much more complex, it's outside of the realm of materialism. So it's 100,
and it's usually much more positive.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to talk over you there, but I do feel that it's more positive. When you find somebody who's so busy hating group X or Y or Z or whatever, right to be angry about some things, we do, but when they make it just so much an anger response and target other groups without thinking, what can I do that will help this situation? What can I do that will make this better? How can I respond to this in a way that will serve my people rather than just allowing me to vent? Which kind of goes back to the edgelord thing in a way, which is edgy and, shit talking and, negative in some respects. So he's got to keep it positive. I don't say that, as somebody who's trying to be nice and, get everybody to not disagree with me or anything like that. No, I'm saying that in a very assertive way. We will kick more butt if we're positive. We will succeed at our goals if we are positive inside and out. And kind of the way I see it.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So, Mr. McNallen, I know you said you wanted to kind of keep it within the confines of a time frame. Do you feel comfortable to keep going, or do you want to shut it down?
Let's give it another 5 or 10 minutes. What do you say?
Sounds great.
Actually, we were going to talk about that flag, weren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. The AFA flag is very well recognized. That is, when I see that symbol, I know exactly what it means. When I see one of the thousands of people on social media that have that symbol, I know exactly what it means. it's a very prolific symbol, especially with us that have been in the folkish movement or the folkish research. Or it doesn't matter if you have picked up the Eddas, and if you have dug into any sort of research online or whatever, you know exactly what and where that symbol comes from. But I've never really knew who came up with it, or could you give us the whole rundown and why you have it hanging this evening?
Well, I decided, wow, it's been quite some years back now, that the AFA needed a distinctive symbol. And, there's so many obvious things that come to mind. But there's a rune stone in Denmark called the Snodelev stone, and it dates from just about the year 800, which was the transition from Elder Futhark to Younger Futhark, and just prior to the official beginning of the Viking Age. So it was at a very important time in the history, not just of the Scandinavian peoples, but also of their spiritual lives. And there are three symbols on that stone. One of them is the old Bronze Age sun wheel, just the circle with the cross in the middle. Mm-hmm. And the second one is the Faustian or the swastika. And the third one is this, the trihorn. And I always kind of looked at those as an evolution. This is just, Steve's unverifiable Gnostic gnosis kind of thing, I guess, Sure. I'm not a scholar on that. I'm no position to make a definitive statement, but from a spiritual aspect, I look at that and I see a progression there. I see in my particular worldview, the Bronze Age representing a very early primordial kind of presence. And that's where you've got that sun wheel going on, all that intense Bronze Age energy. And then you've got the Iron Age that comes along. And that's when the swastika seems to get really important in many ways. It was migration age, it was assertive, it was the age of iron, bronze to iron transition in a way. But this trihorn, pretty obviously, representing the three horns of mead from which Odin drank to win the expanded consciousness. I see that is what this is about. If the first one was bronze and the second one was iron, to me, this is the Ond, the Odinic energy, the prana, the ki, chi, friel, whatever you want to call it. This is the spinning, ecstatic energy that will carry us into the future. So that's why I chose that particular symbol for the AFA. And I still use that, ritually a lot when I'm doing my meditations. So that's why. The blue, of course, is for Odin's cloak. The white is for the ecstatic energy, and the gold ties in well with that as well. So that's why I fly that flag. And even though I no longer speak for the AFA, 20 years of that was enough. I turned that over to Matt. I think Matt's doing a great job, and that symbol is still a very important symbol to me. So that's the story on that.
Has some I know that's personal gnosis, but that's some really, really cool personal gnosis. Yeah.
Well, I think we all get those, and
yeah,
if it works, go with it. Yeah. If it was not an external truth, it is now an internal truth for the individual, and you can benefit from that. You can go places with that. So that works for me. Yeah. I invite people to do that with the understanding that other people may vary.
Yeah.
That's
I think
basically it.
when you're talking about gnosis, man, I think personal gnosis is 100% important. I think it's a beautiful thing, as long as as long as it has utility, and as long as it's it's not some out there goofy stuff. Like your reasoning for the trihorn. I think that's excellent. The fact that this is the symbol that represents taking the Odinic might into the next age and beyond, and then maybe a few hundred years from now somebody will find something else and they'll see that symbol next with some other symbols from some future ages, and they'll come to a same conclusion. That's
Right.
beautiful.
But the Trihorns, yeah, to me that's what comes after rockets. It's the 0 point energy. It's all that wild and wonderful stuff on the fringes of science.
Yeah.
I think that the Trihorn will take us to the stars.
And what said Jesus Christ had one thing that he said that I always thought was really important, and that was something about you'll know some like a divine person by the fruits of what they say, or something like that. Which obviously I'm also true. I'm not a Christian, but I do think that there are truths that parallel, and I think that there's truths that overlap. And I'm not going to denote a truth. I'm not going to denounce a truth because it comes from
Right.
a source. Truth is truth to me. But that quote there is very important. And even though you came out saying that, yeah, this is my personal gnosis, the fact that symbol is on so many people's social media, that symbol has been printed on so many flags, that symbol carries so much resonance and has definition just by looking at it. As I said before, just by looking at it, you know exactly what that means if you have had any sort of exposure to this community or this movement. So that is the fruits of your gnosis that proves that it's true. So, to me, anyways.
Seems to work.
Seems to work.
Wow. Well, Dave, I've really enjoyed this.
Yes, sir.
This is my first time. As a lot of your listeners will know, I did Ragnarok and Roll. I deliberately changed the name because that was it wasn't quite disrespectful, but it was a little, it fitted in well with the culture of what we were doing back then. It was part of that kind of edginess kind of thing, of which I'm as guilty as anybody. But I think God's Folk and Destiny for me says where I'm at now. Ragnarok and Roll. Well, yeah, hard times are coming, and so Ragnarok and Roll. But in preparation for that, and with a more serious note, I like the new title. I'm good with that.
It's good stuff. It's
cool. All right.
It marks our evolution. Our evolution as a movement, as a community. And there's nothing for me. And people that have followed me over the years and stuff know that I've evolved and my content's evolved, and the stuff that to me, if you're not evolving and if you don't have a living tradition in all things, then you grow stagnant, and stagnancy decays, and decay leads to death. So if you have a living tradition, whether it be your religion, whether it be your culture, or if it's your podcast, it's all important to have a living tradition.
Yeah, I'm with that.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Well, all right, my friend, maybe we should sign this off and tell folks to please tune in next week, and we'll be doing some more crazy stuff. Good crazy, in a way. And thanks for helping out, and thanks for all you people out there for being with me and catching this either live as we do it, or catching it up on the Faustian Folk site. And on we go. See you next week.